Saporito. So we already saw Steve Rubin, we already saw Michael Cochran, and now it's time to finish out what it is that we've got at this table. Now, both Steve Rubin and Andrew Cochran were able to actually move into sort of these red-white, sort of one much more aggressive, one a lot more in the 4 and 5 mana spells. So we know that there's not a whole lot of those red and white cards around.
Yeah, and Thiago Saporito, one of my favorite players to watch and enjoy. I mentioned it yesterday. He just seems to walk around with this big smile on his face all the time. Some people, they find what they want to do in life, and it's very, very clear. Thiago, it's about Magic Online and Magic tournaments. That's what he loves to do, and certainly, he plays so much Magic that even though this is a brand new format, we're going to see a well-prepared Thiago Saporito who certainly will understand all the different archetypes. Mentioned yesterday, he when it had a black-white kind of seal deck, we'll see if he goes with something similar in the draft portion, or if the boosters pretend a different color combination.
Yeah, I mean, we've already seen a couple of those Regal Bloodlords that were working themselves around the table. When we were watching Steve Rubin, we saw those get passed. We saw a couple of those when we were watching Michael Cochran as well. And so seeing those work their way around, you got to think they had to end up somewhere.
Right, yeah. I mean, you think that sometimes a card of that level, those power gold uncommons, end up in someone's deck. Someone may be able to be the beneficiary of good luck there.
So we're taking a look here at the first pick of the first pack. The rare is going to be that Sun Cleanser. We've got Exclusion Mage, Ravenous Harpy, Shield Mare. Taking a look at a couple of those options. Exclusion Mage seems like a fine card.
Yeah, Exclusion Mage is the best card in the booster, but a lot of players have shown a preference for drafting white. So it wouldn't surprise me if Thiago went with one of the white cards here, but Exclusion Mage certainly would be the kind of the obvious pick as the best card in the pack.
And that is going to be the takes of that Exclusion Mage. It is 3 mana, 2/2, and it's going to, when it enters the battlefield, return a creature they control to their hand.
Yeah, they printed cards like this throughout Magic history. They've always been really strong tempo play, great answer to auras, and as we mentioned, white-green aura is certainly one of the most terrifying decks that you can face during a Core Set 2019 booster draft.
I mean, even just considering the fact that we saw Steve Rubin 3 Nightly Valors. Mm-hmm. The Exclusion Mage already has some potential to line up nicely with those spells.
Right, yeah. I mean, you put a Nightly Valor on your 4-drop, it's an immediate difficult threat to deal with.
So we are seeing a Bog Stomper, Essence Scatter, Strangling Spores. We've also got the Meteor Golem.
Yeah, I like Meteor Golem quite a bit. A lot of people have called Essence Scatter the best blue common, so I think that certainly Thiago will at least have to consider that to stay on track with a first pick Exclusion Mage. Strangling Spores, fairly strong removal spell. I don't think it's enough better than, for example, Essence Scatter that he'd want to dip into a second color for it. So,
and I'm assuming, do colorless cards, these really splashable ones, have a much higher value in pack 1?
Well, yeah, Meteor Golem does a lot of different things. It's just a objectively powerful card. If Thiago ends up going into, say, a blue-white deck, there are artifact synergies in a blue-black deck. There are ways that you can get it back from its graveyard. So Meteor Golem is going to go well in a lot of your different decks, and certainly taking that over Essence Scatter, perfectly defensible decision. He's not committed or wedded to blue by any stretch of the imagination.
We see that Enigma Drake in this hand. We've also got the Boggart Brute available. There's that Rustwing Falcon. I know you're a fan of that card.
Yeah, I think that this is not maybe the deck where he's going to want to be pursuing the Rustwing Falcon. Enigma Drake, kind of stands out here immediately to me, but this is tough. This is Enigma Drake again. It's a little bit early to be taking a gold card, and certainly Enigma Drake not as powerful as maybe you might remember it from its first iteration, but that
is going to be the take. So we are going to add that sort of X4 flyer to the pile of cards. It is going to have that power equal to the number of instant or sorceries that you have in your graveyard. So a card that really rewards you for being a very spell-heavy
right,
deck.
and blue-red is the spell deck, right, in theory. So, and you see Thiago kind of lingered on some of the white cards in previous boosters, and now here comes the treasure trove of options in white, and really nothing in blue or red for him. So we're going to see him dip into another color here, and I think he's regretting taking Enigma Drake over Pegasus Courser, but hard to fault him for that in the moment. I mean, Enigma Drake, I think, is enough better than Pegasus Courser that it was worth him pursuing the upside, but now he's dipping into a few different colors early here.
Yep, Angel of the Dawn is going to be the grab for that pick. It is a 5-mana 3/3 with flying, and when it enters the battlefield, creatures you control get +1/+1 and vigilance until end of turn. Really helps a go wide strategy. Looks like there is that Arcades, the strategist, that we saw earlier, and there might be some consideration for that one, actually. Also looking at a Snapping Drake, an Oaken form in this hand as well, and a Gearsmith Guardian.
Yeah, this is actually a really tough pick. He's been really put to the test early. He's going to go with the Snapping Drake, which I think is a nice, solid creature for a blue-white flyers or a blue-red deck. It's definitely defensible. I think taking a card like Arcades is extremely high variance situation. Obviously, there are certain types of decks where it can work out really well, but early on in the format, I doubt that players will have had enough reps with Arcades to be comfortable taking it.
And there's that Pegasus Courser. We saw him pass on one earlier, also taking a look at Skyscanner and Snapping Drake, so a lot of options just in the flying realm in this pack as well.
Yeah, so this is a pretty close pick. I actually have a slight preference for Skyscanner in these blue-white decks. He's going to go with the Pegasus Courser. I think that we're pretty heavily psychologically anchored in how strong Pegasus Courser was in the last set, so where it was one of the best commons. I think in blue-white, specifically in M19, Pegasus Courser is okay. It's obviously a strong card, but Skyscanner with all of the artifact synergies is a really, really strong role player, so he's going to want to pick up some of those at some point during the draft.
We see one with the machine and that Daybreak Chaplain. That is going to be a 1/3 with a lifelink. Also has some options of Wall of Mist if you were to choose that one, but it's going to be that Daybreak Chaplain that goes to the pot.
Yeah, and we see Thiago do a few things here. So he picks up an early card for his curve to make sure that he obviously takes care of that. Second, these types of 1/3 lifelink for 2 in decks that have a lot of flying creatures does a really, really nice job gumming up the ground early against maybe say one of those white-red go wide decks or or a green aggressive deck where it's going to be able to block for a little while, and then on the turn where it eventually chump blocks, it's been gaining you life and preventing damage the whole time, so buys you the time you need to attack with your flyers.
And it looks like we are going to see a Frilled Sea Serpent. We've got Thud. We've got Explosive Apparatus. There's that trusty Pack Beast.
Yeah, and the apparatus here, really, really nice card. It's we mentioned in sealed deck, it goes into every deck, whereas in booster draft, you really want it in blue-white. That's where it's going to be the strongest. You can get it back with a trusty Pack Beast. It activates a lot of your different artifact synergies, and it's that one-man artifact we've seen, again, throughout Magic history. They put a lot of these one-man artifacts, seeded them into sets, and they're really important to pick up for your blue-white artifacts deck to make sure that your all of your triggers turn on.
And we're coming back to this one. It's got that Sun Cleanser, the Loxodon Linebreaker, also a copy of Invoke the Divine Field Creeper in here, which for me gets an honorable mention because it might actually just be one of my favorite arts in the game.
Yeah, and again, I really like the way that Thiago is drafting here. He picks up the Linebreaker, and he's hoping to not put Loxodon Linebreaker in his deck, but he's respecting, the booster draft enough to know that sometimes he may have to, and he doesn't want to put himself in a situation late in the draft where he has to take, really low power cards over better cards just to fill his curve. So he makes that investment now, and that way he doesn't get punished later.
Ether Tunnel is going to be the take from that pack. So this is the one that gives a creature +1/+0, and it cannot be blocked. So that is going to also be a really nice addition if he ends up wanting to run that on some sort of card that would not have its own natural evasion.
Yeah, blue-white, not traditionally the best archetype for that. A lot of your creatures already come with evasion built in. So, but Ether Tunnel certainly against a removal light opponent or against someone who's able to stonewall your flyers is something that he may want to bring in out of the sideboard.
Viashino Pyromancer, the take there, just adding it to the pile. It's a fine card, but it's probably not going to make the cut.
Yeah, maybe just doesn't want your opponent to have it.
Gearsmith Guardian, how do you feel about that card? It, on the surface, it's a 5-mana 3/5, but it gets +2/+0 as long as you control a blue creature.
Yeah, I think it's a totally reasonable card. I mean, if you're able to turn it on pretty consistently, 5-mana 5/5 artifact is a really reasonable baseline power level card. And again, in order to have the highest ceiling for your blue-white decks, you do need a critical mass of artifacts, and there's a lot of ways that you can take advantage of having an artifact on the battlefield. So when you're able to do that without sacrificing mean power level, then you're really drafting the deck the right way.
Yeah, taking a look at what we have so far, it looks like we dipped our toes a little bit into the pool of red, but overall, pretty solidly in a blue-white strategy.
Yeah, I mean, he got the Enigma Drake, basically, that he thought he might be interested in for a little bit, but it was white that was really kind of most open. I don't think he's going to be thrilled with the way things are going after Pack 1. He doesn't have that high a power level, but the flip side is that he's got a reasonable curve. He's got plenty of playable cards. He's got evasion. He's got interaction. You see him notice him kind of pull those blue cards up to the top. He's wondering basically, what if I totally abandon blue at this point? Would I have enough cards in just white or just in blue-red, for example, where I could abandon a color entirely? So he's kind of looking at, what does my just white deck look like? What does my just blue deck look like? What does my blue-red deck look like? Right? You see him now pulling to the front. And this is him thinking, okay, I would love to just... My dream is that the blue and the white cards flow in Pack 2. But if that doesn't happen, what are the other ways that I can kind of divert my draft if the packs dictate it?
Yeah, so really taking a step to prepare for this next pack, even in these small moments between them. And
that's something the great players do, right? Novice drafters will get into two colors and then kind of put the blinders on. They just take the best card of those two colors. The truly great players like Thiago Saporito is really kind of understanding that he's not committed to two colors yet. He has dipped his toes in a few different pools so far, and he's going to want to try to solidify that now early in Pack 2. And look at that smile on his face. Like,
he's having a good time.
He's having a good time. He's here. He's playing in the first Corset Limited Grand Prix. He's 9-0. He's got an Exclusion Mage, and now he's probably going to open some Broken Mythic. I'd have a smile on my face too.
I mean, Broken Mythic is always the dream, right?
Yeah.
He was able to pull out just some phenomenal wins yesterday, trying to enter into this one as well. And we're going to see Luminous Bonds. That's a pretty nice way to go about it. Departed Deckhand. There's also that Cleansing Nova.
Yeah.
Now,
Cleansing Nova, beautiful. I mean, Cleansing Nova for like a blue-white deck, this is about as strong as it gets. But interesting. He's pulling a couple other cards up to the front.
Yeah, and that Cleansing Nova, this could be the very same one that we saw at a certain point in Steve Rubin's draft, making its way around where he ended up taking a Knightly Valor off of it. So actually, I think this might be a situation where he moves himself maybe into something more aggressive.
Yeah, surprising to me. I consistently feel like great players underrate Wrath of God effects. I mean, Destroy All Creatures is a really, really powerful ability, and I like the Departed Deckhand as much as the next person. It's a really strong card. It's a nice curve filler. You know me, I love someone who respects a good mana curve, but the amount of games in which your opponent, you just get to 3-for-1 or 4-for-2 your opponent with a Cleansing Nova, I would have been really strongly tempted to consider it.
So we have got Gallant Cavalry, Shieldmare, Switcheroo in this one as well. How do you feel about a card like Switcheroo? Is it high power level? Is it low power level? Is it variable? Where's that?
Highly situational, right? If you're able to create a lot of tokens, or if your opponent has a lot of 6+ mana cards in their deck, Switcheroo can be pretty good. A lot of the time, the floor on Switcheroo is very, very low. So you oftentimes have Switcheroo be completely uncastable or very, very mediocre value. I love this pick by Thiago Saporito. Shieldmare, again, as the cheapest card in the booster pack, he's respecting the curve. Obviously, the life gain ability is highly, highly relevant in a deck that's trying to win with evasive threats. I think that's a really nice pick for Thiago.
So we're going to head into the next one. There is a Regal Bloodlord Aviation Pioneer in this pack. We've also got access to a Gearsmith Prodigy and a Trusty Pack Beast are sort of the cards in his colors already.
Yeah, Aviation Pioneer, rock solid common in general. This happens to be maybe the single best archetype for it. So whenever you pick up an absolute premium common, after the first couple picks, you're certainly happy to do so.
And tell me about, we keep seeing him really quickly identify the cards that he's interested in, and then we'll see him make several runs through the pack afterward. Tell me a little bit about, what's his mindset when he's going through and making sure that he knows all these cards.
Well, it's preparation, right? You can even see in Steve was moving much more slowly through the packs. I think Steve had to read or maybe re-familiarize himself with some of the cards, Thiago immediately knows all of these cards because he's probably done 100 booster drafts on Magic Online already. So he knows very quickly the pick order that he is kind of interested in for his archetype that he's now settled into, and it's really just about understanding the specific realities of this particular draft. So again, he pulls a Essence Scatter and a few other kind of really strong cards for blue-white to the front.
Yeah, we see Essence Scatter, we see Cancel, we see Bone to Ash, we also see Scholar of Stars, and I think there was a Dwarven Priest as well. So 5 cards that were really in his realm of what he might be interested in.
Yep, and then the other thing you mentioned about him pulling, a bunch of cards and then kind of going back through the pack again, especially early, the first few packs, he's considering 2 things there. Number 1, what might potentially table, what might I get 9th, 10th, 11th pick, and then second, are there tricks or things like that I might need to play around during the course of the draft as I pass them to the person on my right.
So Knight of the Tusk, Gearsmith Prodigy, also a Rupture Spire available. Really looking at those 3 cards primarily from the looks of it. Gearsmith Prodigy is it's a 1/2 for a single mana that becomes a 2/2 as long as you control an artifact. Looks like he was liking that Knight of the Tusk.
Yeah, Knight of the Tusk, again, he hopes to have it not make his deck, but he is invested enough in his mana curve, taking enough 2 and 3 mana cards that if he needs to have a curve topper, it's good to have access to something like Knight of the Tusk, which can, block Colossal Dreadmaw.
It's going to be Talarian Scholar that moves to front alongside Make a Stand, which is one of those anthems. Creatures you control get +1/+0 and indestructible. Also, we do see that Rustwing Falcon. So taking a look at this, it is an instant speed, so it also acts as a combat trick.
Yeah, Make a Stand, not great in blue-white. This is more of a card that you want in one of those red-white decks. But, Thiago did just pass a Cleansing Nova, so, the kind of card that he may want to have at least access to from the sideboard to bring in against Cleansing Nova. And, if you have to main deck a Make a Stand, it's certainly not the end of the world.
Okay, so really just keep in mind, going back to that, being aware of what is at the table, what's around the table, and taking a pick to where normally you think of that as a combat trick, but it could also be a tool against one of those very powerful cards.
Yeah, and this is going to be annoying for Thiago, right? So he moved out of red. Now he sees 4 playable red cards with 9 cards left in the pack.
Omniscience too.
Yeah, so this is explaining kind of. You see why the red was able to flow so much to Steve Rubin in Pack 2 earlier on. Thiago just defensively drafting a Spark Tongue Dragon, which is strong against his deck, but nothing for him there.
We see another Knight of the Tusk and a Gearsmith Prodigy. There's not a whole lot of cards that are in his colors. This blue-white deck not really coming together.
Yeah, I mean, he's got enough playables that he's not in catastrophic shape. His power level is probably not as high as he would like it to be. But he has curve, he's got interaction, he's got evasion. He's just a little bit light on power.
Mm-hmm. Taking a Liliana untouched by death. When in doubt, grab the Planeswalker.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, obviously, add to your collection.
Taking a look, we see another one of, I think, these Loxodon Line Breakers available. There's also the Frilled Sea Serpent. That is just a 6-mana 4/6, but you can invest some mana into it to make it to where it can't be blocked for 7 mana.
Yeah, I've been impressed by the Frilled Sea Serpent. I think that Thiago correctly identifies the Explosive Apparatus as the pick here. It's again, a card we mentioned as being particularly strong in these sort of white-blue decks. Dealing with an annoying thing like an Onaki Ogre while you're attacking with your flying creatures. And he hasn't picked up a lot of the artifact synergies, but he still has another booster to find some of those. Explosive Apparatus, obviously just a fine baseline power level card.
Yeah, and I think one thing that I've noticed is that sometimes when you're drafting, there's there's the payoffs and then there's the enablers for it.
Mm-hmm.
And for this blue-white artifact deck, how do you feel about the direction that you want to be going about that pick order? Are you really trying to find the cards that are going to enable them, or are you trying to find the payoffs as soon as you can?
It's tough. I'm the kind of person who really, really likes to draft. Oh, wow.
Scholar of Stars.
Yeah.
Very nice.
So there you go. There's the reward for taking those explosive apparatus, right? Apparati, is it apparatuses? I like to draft for sealing, and apparently Thiago does too. So when you make, it's about investment and reward. So you make an investment by taking a card like Explosive Apparatus, which is like, okay, but you're never that excited to put it in your deck. And the reward is you get something like Scholar of Stars, which is an above-rate card if you're able to trigger the ability. And then when you combine enough of those investments with rewards, that's what creates a truly synergistic deck and the the really shining examples of specific archetypes in archetype-driven formats.
So we're just going to see an Act of Treason and a Mountain as the last couple of picks there. Not a whole lot of options. It was an Act of Treason or a Sovereign's Bite.
Yeah, Active Treason, not that strong against Thiago's strategy, but is exactly the kind of card that someone with one of those red-black sacrifice decks might want to have. And so whenever you have a chance to deny an opponent a kind of a key cog in their archetype without costing yourself any equity, that's a chance that you definitely want to take in pod play.
Yeah, I'm going to be pretty curious to see what he does as he reviews this last or the second pack, and when he kind of goes through this collection. At the end of the first pack, we saw him really trying to manipulate, work through what other options that he might have heading into the second pack. What kind of things might he be considering as he prepares for the third pack?
Well, now I think that he's removed the possibility, really, of being red. I mean, he picked up a Spark-Tongue Dragon, but really, has a grand total of 2 or 3 playable red cards. He's solidly into, blue-white now. He's got, some pretty significant amount of ways to produce artifacts, a few rewards for having artifacts on the battlefield, a good amount of flyers, a good mana curve. What he wants to do is now, basically he's looking for power level. He wants to just increase his deck from, right now it looks like to be about a 5. He wants to make it about a 7 or an 8 to give himself the best chance to to book that 2-1, or if he gets lucky, a 3-0 finish and get himself on the way to the top 8. So he's got a nice deck. He doesn't have any glaring holes. He just wants to pick up some of those really strong rares and uncommons that turn your archetype. There you go, Aerial Engineer being a perfect example, that turn your archetype from a mediocre version into a really strong version.
Yeah, and a big theme of what you were talking about yesterday was that sealed comes down to either you're a deck that has got the bombs, you're a deck that can answer the bombs, or you're a deck that is really just trying to take an unusual angle to try and steal a win. And in Draft, does that same mentality translate pretty directly, or is it warped a little bit?
Not exactly, because there's an entirely different sort of angle, which is the synergies, right? Maybe Explosive Apparatus and Scholar of Stars independently don't fit any of those sort of paradigms, but when you combine those two cards together, all of a sudden your deck is doing very powerful things, and you're getting more for your mana than you should be by any right. And so when you're consistently getting rewarded larger than your mana investment, that's creating synergies, that's creating power level that don't necessarily come from things that are just standalone, independently and objectively powerful, like, for example, Mythic Rares, Ajani, Tezzeret, the cards that we saw so dominant during Seal Deck.
Right. So now, when you're talking about looking for power level, it's not so much finding the perfect Mythic. It's about finding the cards that are really the glue that is going to bring this deck together and turn it into a singular, well-oiled machine, since it's the artifact deck.
Yes, and we say frequently like this, Thiago set himself up where he's got his sides, his mashed potatoes, he's got a nice glass of wine, and, he's got his steak knife. What he really would love is a nice big ribeye, in that case, this is that Mythic or the gold uncommon or something like that he can put on his plate, because he's got the table set really nicely for the first 2 packs, and he just needs the packs to break well. You need to open that booster and crack those right cards here.
It's 10:45, and you've got me thinking about dinner. Thanks for that, Paul. All right, so we're going to see the Gallant Cavalry in here. There's a Lathless in this pack, but he's not in the red. We've seen him continually find some of these really powerful red cards, too.
Yeah, this is the nightmare, right? I mean, he just, I think, has a little bit too much of an investment to both white and blue to now dive back into red. So
Gargoyle Sentinel, one of these artifact creatures. It's a 3/3 for 3 with Defender. You can pay another 3 mana to let it attack and gain flying. There is also this Gallant Cavalry and Disperse as a nice little way to have pseudo removal, maybe a trick. Versatile spell.
Yeah, all 3 pretty reasonable. Gallant Cavalry probably the best card in the pack, but all 3 are cards that you'd be absolutely fine. And I think Gargoyle Sentinel, pretty good pick here. Thiago continuing to value increasing his total volume of artifacts and another curve filler as well. So I like the way Thiago's drafting, and I like the discipline to pass the Lathless, as painful as that might be.
It's just got to feel bad, but you at least now he'll be one of the players at the table who can have a game plan for a Lathless and a Cleansing Nova. He knows that those 2 cards are at the table, and he's probably a bit envious, but at least he knows that he's needs to have a game plan for them.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's one thing to know you need to have a game plan. It's another thing to actually deal with Lathless when it comes onto the battlefield. So That's not easy to pass, but good discipline. I mean, I think that there's a temptation to just take the Lathless there and then see if you can dip back into red. But the truth is that you'd have to abandon such a huge chunk of the base of your deck that all of a sudden that you'd be relying too much on power level and just giving up a lot of those synergies that you worked so hard to accumulate.
Yeah, it's so interesting watching sort of the difference between Pack 1, Pack 2, and Pack 3, because it really sort of reminds me of, like, zoning in on the bullseye, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, at the very beginning, you've got the board. You've got the whole dartboard available to you, and then each pack really restricts the options that you have, and you need to keep finding yourself in this narrower realm where it just gets harder and harder to stray outside of it.
Right, yeah. And, certainly at Pack 2, if he'd opened Lathless, I think he would have gladly taken it. But now Pack 3, the ship has kind of sailed there.
Yep. So we are going to see a Militia Bugler. There's that Magistrate's Scepter, a shock in this pack, but he is not in red anymore, or really never quite was. Explosive Apparatus, another option. But this Militia Bugler, a fine card, 2/3 for 3. It's got Vigilance, and when it enters the battlefield, you're going to look at the top 4, grab a creature card with power 2 or less from among them, put it into your hand. How much does that ability need to be good for it to make its way into your deck?
Not too much. I mean, if it hits every now and then, it's fine. I mean, 3 mana, 2/3 Vigilance is only a little bit below par in terms of what you'd be willing to play anyway. That card should probably cost something like 2.8 mana, for example. So if that ability hits every now and then, you're going to be really, really happy with it. And I feel happy for Thiago. He finally got an easy pick with the Militia Bugler. I feel like every single pick he's been put to the to the grind here in terms of what he should take.
Ooh, we got the Millstone, but there is the Angel of the Dawn. That seems to be the pretty happy take. There was also the Take Vengeance in that pack. Didn't even really consider the card.
Yeah, no, it's a close pick. I mean, and that indicates to me, and I wouldn't have been as confident as Thiago was. I think this is an indication that Thiago is pretty well prepared for this tournament, given how confidently and quickly he made that decision. So, Take Vengeance, absolutely a strong removal spell against certain decks, but Angel of the Dawn is going to be good all the time, and it's a card that, as I've been watching this weekend, I've become more and more impressed with.
Yeah, and Take Vengeance, it does destroy target tapped creature. It is conditional. Maybe just thinking that a removal spell like that does not work into his game plan if he's not intending for his creatures or his opponent's creatures to really often be attacking him.
Yeah, and here,
Diamond Mare, Gallant
Cavalry. Yeah, so some good options here, and he's certainly not getting cut out of white or anything like that. He's not upset, but he's not getting those sorts of rares, uncommons, mythics, really, really high power level cards that we talked about him looking for earlier. So he looks to be drafting, about a 5. You know what I mean? Like, his deck is about a 5. A player of his caliber could easily pull off a 2-1 or even a 3-0 with a deck like this, but he's gonna. It looks like the way the direction of this draft is going, he's gonna leave feeling okay about the way things went. Certainly not great.
We've got Leon and Vanguard, a Dwindle, Explosive Apparatus. There is a Totally Lost if you really feel like you want to go for that option. There is the Phylactery Lich. That technically works with the artifacts, but that would take a pretty distinct deviation. So Dwindle is going to be the take, -6, -0, and when that enchanted creature blocks, you will destroy it.
Yeah, but you're just lacking a lot of things like something like Ether Shield Artificer, or as we mentioned earlier, the Aerial Engineer. The types of cards. Obviously, again, we talked about potentially Planeswalkers or Mythics, the kind of cards that make you feel really excited when you go sit down. He just kind of has some good synergies, a good curve, and sometimes that's enough.
We've got Scholar of Stars, Cavalry Drillmaster, Daybreak, Chaplain. Yeah, I think one card that I was really hoping to see in this pack 3 for him was something like the Skilled Animator as well, with those Explosive Apparatus that he was able to take earlier. But still quite a few options, still trying to make this deck that really is just going to have a game plan. But yeah, that Skilled Animator on turn 3 with an Apparatus was really what I was hoping to see.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, but certainly plenty of players have been successful with just good curve blue-white beatdown decks with plenty of evasion. And importantly, I think he both has a nice critical mass of evasive threats and enough sort of ground defense and bounce and ways to deal with, difficult threats from his opponent, that he can win those sorts of games by playing, what's a traditional blue-white plan.
It's going to be Child of Night the take, so he had a couple of options that were in color for him, choosing to deviate from that and just take the 2-1 for 2 with lifelink.
Yeah, and we talked about yesterday, Thiago being in a black-white deck. So Thiago may be thinking the Child of Night, as we mentioned in Pack 2 with the Active Treason, the Child of Night might be someone that potentially drafting a black-white deck somewhere to his left, he wants to deny that person the opportunity to have a nice 2-drop that fits their strategy.
Taking the cancel as well, and like we mentioned before, Thiago has seen some of these Regal Bloodlords working around the table. He has seen some of those powerful white cards, some of those powerful black cards.
Lathless, yeah. So there's Lathless, Cleansing No, but there's plenty of potential targets for cancel at the table, and good players. Again, we talked about drafting for the sideboard. He may not main deck this cancel, but having access to it in your stack of drafted cards is very valuable.
It's going to be Disperse that works its way to the front of the pack, also in Eggs the Heavens, but it is going to be that Disperse, very versatile spell. It's going to be fine.
Yeah, and frequently the Disperse, the problem with Disperse is that you're creating card disadvantage. You're trading a card, a resource, and not actually getting anything back. In this format, you can both oftentimes get one card worth of value for it if you're bouncing a creature that's enchanted with an aura, or you don't care about being down a card because you're attacking in the air with flying creatures, and all you need to do is survive enough turns to let your flyers do their job.
We see him again taking one of these cards that's off color, takes the Active Treason as opposed to what was in his colors. There was an Uncomfortable Chill in the pack. Decided that was not part of the game plan that he was interested in, and just takes the Active Treason, looking at the Millstone. I think just trying to eliminate some of the options from the people beside him at this point.
Yeah, Millstone is something that, again, he may consider sideboarding in. If his opponent is really well equipped to stop flying attackers, is just filled with removal spells and can handle a bunch of 3/3 flyers, Thiago gumming up the ground and sitting behind a Millstone in a post-sideboard game is definitely something he might consider.
Mighty Leap is going to be the take. We see Ether Tunnel, Phylactery Lich, and a Highland Lake. It's going to be that shiny Ether Tunnel.
Yeah, there's some consideration of taking the Highland Lake, hopefully to mess with your opponent on the left. But Ether Tunnel, there are some corner cases where he might want to use that card, so opting to take the card for himself as opposed to defensively drafting.
Oh, and not going to take that Magistrate Scepter.
Yeah.
All right, so we see Thiago Saporito's deck kind of come together at the end, but like you were saying, was really struggling on finding the cards that were the final payoffs of a lot of those strategies that he was working himself into. How do you feel about this deck sort of holistically now that we've seen all 3 of these packs come together?
Yeah, it's a 5. It's a medium deck. It certainly was not a catastrophe by any stretch. It's difficult to point to any picks that he could have made differently. Sometimes you're in the right colors or close to the right colors, and the packs just don't break that well for you. You open Lathless instead of a Johnny. It's just like that. Those sorts of things happen. But in Booster Draft, you can win with a 5, and he has a version of blue-white that, despite not having an extremely high ceiling, high power level decks, he can easily win. Thiago with a great 9-0 start could easily keep himself in the tournament with a 2-1 here, I think.
All right, well, that is going to bring us to the end of the drafting portion here. Now we are going to be getting ready for round 10. Let's see what these players are able to do with the decks. We'll be right back here at GP Sacramento after these messages.